Hi everyone, and welcome to my second YouTube cross-stitching video as Stitchy. After I'd finished my first video where I talked you through charting up the project that you can see there on the screen, I thought it might be quite interesting for some people for me to follow through the process of the project from start to finish. So that's what I'll be covering over my next few videos, and today I'm going to start with showing you how I kit up and prepare to start my stitching. So the first thing that I'm going to do is take you on a brief tour. The room that I'm currently sat in is my study, and it's at the moment where I keep all my crafting stuff and where I filmed the last YouTube video. I am getting a craft room upstairs, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, as long as negotiations with Indoors continue in the right direction. But for now, all of my crafting stuff is kept in this little corner of the study. And I've just got all of my card making and cross-stitching stuff in this pile. So just bear with me a moment, I'll find the things I need and then I'll be right back. So I've commented a few times on one of the cross-stitch Facebook groups that I'm in about how envious I feel of people with enormous stash, and you're about to find out why. My stash is pretty much in this box, plus another box which I'll show you in a minute. This is where I keep all of my Ada and all of my little embellishments that I use. I've got my ribbons and bits in here. I won't be using any of those for this project. And I've got a collection of buttons in here because I quite like using buttons and beads and things on some of my projects. But the thing that I'm interested in today is my white count Ada, so I'm just going to need to sift through the various different colours and offcuts. I keep all my offcuts of Ada. They're very useful for little cards, little designs. You never really know when you're going to require some, so I never throw it away, even if it's quite small. Now looking at this, this is probably not going to be the right size. No, it's not, so I will save that piece for another time and I will continue on. And I want a white count, 14 count Ada. I think some of you remember that I said last time the graph paper that I've charted it on is 14 count. Doesn't really matter. I could easily adapt it to something a different size, but I feel like the modern flavour of the pattern that I want and the colours will work very well on this white Ada. This is a large piece that I bought from a local craft store a while ago. It's a nice quality, just the right amount of stiffness. And I literally just will use this and measure out how much of it I require for my pattern. So this is the other piece of stash or storage equipment that forms part of my toolkit for this process. My trusty sewing box, which my mum bought me many years ago, in the, I think, vain hope that I would one day become a needlework expert, which never really happened. And as you can see, this is where I keep all my threads, pins, needles, etc, etc. And in here is my little pin cushion, and I'll explain in a moment why I need a pin cushion to kit up. It's really just so that I can store these needles, which I'm going to use for counting out and measuring my pattern. So now that I've got my Ada and the other bits that I need, I can start measuring out my fabric. As I mentioned on the last video, the graph paper that I'm using is equivalent to about 14 count. It's actually not quite 14 count, it's about 13.5 count. But I use this always as my guide because I'd rather have a slightly larger piece of Ada than I need than come up too small. So because of that, the easiest way for me to calculate the size of my Ada is to literally just measure my chart across. And it's 18 centimetres across by 11, just over 11. It's 11 and one little square. Now, of course, I can't just have a piece of Ada which is the exact size as this because I need to allow for framing. I know that some people allow a couple of inches or 3 inches each side for traditional framing, but those of you that have seen my past projects will know that what I tend to do when I mount my projects and frame them is I leave the edges frayed and exposed, and then I stick them over the mount rather than wrapping it round and threading it. So because of that, I normally allow a 1 centimetre margin all the way round. So again, it's very easy to calculate, of course. So this is 18, so I need a centimetre here and a centimetre here, so that's 20. This is 11, so I need centimetre, that's 13. So my final piece of Ada, just on that basic calculation using the pattern, is 20 by 13. So that is my super simple way of calculating to get a piece of Ada that's, you know, there or thereabouts right for my chart. If I want to be a bit more scientific about it, or let's just say that I want to stitch this chart but I want to stitch it on 18 count Ada, how would I go about that? I've seen lots of questions on similar subjects on forums, so I just thought that it was worth running that through quickly. So my starting point for this would be how many stitches have I got, and by how many stitches, again, I mean how many cross stitches, so how many little squares in total have I got. Now this is where my graph paper again helps me, because whilst it's got all these individual little squares that I put my crosses in, I don't know whether you can see, but each little square is grouped together in fives, and then there are these larger squares, and each larger square is a centimetre, but each larger square contains 5 stitches. So because I know that, a very, very easy way to calculate my stitch count is to literally just count the number of squares, and I already know it's 18 because it's 18 centimetres, and I did double check that. So therefore all I need to do is 18 times 5, which my trusty calculator earlier told me was 90. So I've got 90 stitches to allow for here. I do exactly the same thing going down this way. That was 11 centimetres, 11 times 5 being 55. So I need to calculate for 90 stitches by 55 stitches. Now, as I'm sure most people are aware, the counts that you get in fabric are based on the number of stitches per inch. So 14 count means you get 14 stitches or 14 little squares covered in an inch of fabric. So as I said before, if I was calculating this for 18, all that I would do is take 90, being my stitches, and divide that by 18. So 90 divided by 18 gives me 5. So I would need a 5-inch piece of fabric going along this way. And then similarly, I would do 55 divided by 18, which comes out to be 3, just over 3. So I would need a piece 5 by 3. I would then add on the amount that I wanted for borders, and as I say, that's everybody's personal preference, but that would then give me my count. So for this pattern, I'm going to go with the first method that I showed you. So I'm going to measure a piece of Ada, which is 20 centimetres by 13 centimetres. So I literally take the Ada, nothing particularly scientific about this, take my ruler, and I will measure 20 centimetres, and then, this is where my pins come in, I will put my pin, oh, there it is, I'll put my pin in the nearest hole that I've got to the 20 centimetre piece, and then I will measure down and do exactly the same thing. Oh, let's do it this side so that it's a bit easier. Exactly the same thing, put in my little pin, the nearest hole to 13, and then I will take this super duper large pin, which is actually, I think, something that is used to hold a needle minder onto a lace pillow that my mum gave me. And for some reason I just love it. I don't know why, but it looks like, you know, in the wrong hands that could be quite a serious weapon, so don't anybody mess with my stitching. So I literally just use this as a guide, really, so that I make sure that I follow along the rows. And this is one of the things that I love about Ada, because it's just so easy, isn't it? Because, you know, the row is literally just each of the holes, and you're never going to get a wobbly line, and you're never going to go wrong as long as you just keep checking back with the little pin. I always find that I get to, you know, the halfway point and then blink and lose my place. So I make sure that every 10 or so I stick the pin in for a minute, allow myself a blink and a cough and a shuffle about, and then carry on. But that is the line that I'm going to cut, which I'm going to do off camera in case I mess it up. So for those of you in the UK, in true Blue Peter style, here's one I did earlier. For those of you that are not in the UK, that will have made no sense at all, but trust me, it will do to the UK people. So I can assure you this was my first attempt to cut. I know I said I would do it off camera, but it all worked out fine. So I have my piece of 20 by 13 count Ada, and so now I'm ready for the next part of my kitting up, which is selecting my floss and preparing my needles. So remember earlier when I said that I have serious stash envy most of the time. It doesn't end with my Ada box, it also continues into my little floss box, because this is it, sadly, people. I know that lots and lots of you have got huge, great quantities of floss, but I've only been stitching really since February, so this is all that I've accumulated so far. So I keep it in my little plastic box, and because I know a lot of people are interested in how other people store their thread, I'm a plastic bobbins girl, and I tend to use the little holes at the end of the bobbin for any off-cut bits that are not the full length. So the reason that I've selected this one is because this is one of the colours that I've already decided I'm going to use. One of the things that I really like about designing my own patterns is that I don't feel then that I have to use certain colours. I think if I did charts, and certainly if I'd already bought the kits that have got all the thread in them, I would feel compelled to just go with whatever the original designer thought were the right colours. And as I said in my first video, I tend to quite like bright colours and do sort of quite bold stitching. So I like to mix it up a bit sometimes, and you'll see from here that the few flosses that I have collected are in the main quite bright, vibrant colours. I've got quite a lot of metallics here and relatively few neutral sort of colours. So despite the fact that I've got quite a lot of the rainbow here, then because this is a baby girl sampler, I did want to use quite traditional colours for it, in part because I'm doing quite a modern design, so I thought if I did a modern design and then did way out colours, then the parents probably wouldn't like it. So I've already charted it in as near to the colours as I could get that I wanted to use, which is a very pale silvery grey and a very pale pink for the background, with two darker shades of pink for the centrepiece, which will then be a cream panel with the border round. So going through my floss box, and I have cheated and prepared this earlier, these are the two threads that I want to use. Oh, don't know where that bit's come from. These are the threads that I want to use for my border, my background rather. So it's a very pale pink, as I say, and a very pale silvery grey. So all I now need to do is get my needles and get my cottons cut and start threading. Okay, so the way that I choose the length of cotton that I'm going to use to stitch is not particularly scientific. I've heard lots of people talk about what's too long, what's too short. You know, it should be the length of your arms from your elbow to your wrist and all sorts of different things. I don't know. I've just by trial and error worked out that 10 wraps round of this bobbin gives me around about the length of thread that I want. So I literally just start unravelling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and yes, I know I said 10, but those eagle-eyed amongst you will have spotted that there was already some there. And then I just get my needlework scissors and cut. So now I've got my thread cut to the length that I want. All I need to do is just thread up my needle and then I'm ready to start stitching. At the moment the floss is still in 5 strands, so the first thing that I need to do is just select one strand, and then I'm going to use the loop start method for my stitching. So I fold my piece of cotton in half, and then I take the 2 cut ends together. Just do that again. 2 cut ends together, and hopefully you can see that then forms a loop at the other end. I am a licker, sorry about that, so I'll lick the cut ends of my threads, put them through my needle, and then I've got my loop, and I'm just going to do that with my grey as well as my pink, and then I'm ready to start stitching my background. That's all I wanted to go through with you really today. I hope that it's not been too boring. And next time I'll hopefully have a progress update to show you, and I'll also show you how I do my loop method stitching, and a couple of other starts and finishes as well. So I'll see you all next time. Thank you.